Virag,
please start.
good evening, friends. So today we are having a special India's series webinar, India's 115 revenue from contracts with customers. So today we are having dignitaries and very well-known personality, CA Anand Banka sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
I am giving his introduction. He is a very well-known faculty in ICI. He is a head financial reporting and head of financial reporting department at Vedanta Group. Apart from CA, he holds diploma information system audit DISA and IFRS diploma in IFRS from ACCA UK. He has delivered more than 250 lectures in India, USA, UAE, and Nepal. He has over 12 years experience in helping companies across all sectors coverage with IFRS. He is the author of following books published: India's Simplified 3 editions, India's Simplified with Illustration, Comprehensive Guidance to India's Implementation, Comprehensive Guide to Indian GAAP. So he's a well-known author. He's a special invitee in Accounting Standard Board of ICAI, and he's taking various lecture at ICAI. With this brief introduction, I request Anand sir to please start the session.
Good evening, friends. So today we'll be doing India's 115 revenue from contracts with customer. Now, to give you a brief background on this topic, initially there was India's 18, which is on revenue, which was similar to a little different, but on the lines of our accounting standard 9. Now, in India, if I just take you back to the accounting standards, there was accounting standard 7 on construction contracts. There was accounting standard 9 on revenue, which included basically 3 sections, which is revenue from sale of goods, from rendering of services, and from interest, royalties, and dividends. So essentially, if you see, there is one specialized standard on revenue, which is construction contract, and a generic standard on revenue, which includes 3 sections which I just mentioned. That means if you just go deeper and see how revenue was recognized in India till now, if it was construction contract, then you had to follow proportionate completion method, percentage of completion method as per accounting standard 7. If it was sale of goods, you had to follow a risk and rewards model, and whenever the risk and rewards were transferred, you were to recognize revenue. Normally this only happened at the time of transferring the possession of the goods, generally, but yes, timing could differ. Then there was revenue from rendering of services, wherein it was based on proportionate completion method, or in certain cases completed contract method also. So the method which you used to follow was dependent upon the transaction type. So in my services, if my services is based on something which is a single transaction, a single step, a single activity, then you had to follow completed contract method. But if it was based on multiple activities, then you had to follow proportionate completion method. And then interest, royalties, and dividends. Interest was based on time. Dividend was based on whenever it was announced and it became you had right to receive. So likewise, different type of revenues had different criteria to be fulfilled for you to recognize revenue. Ind AS 115, which is revenue from contracts with customer, is a single standard which replaces both these standards, which is revenue from the normal revenue standard, which I just discussed, and the construction contract standard. this is a single standard which will cover revenue for all types. Okay? And this has no sections like AS9 had, which I said are 3 sections, right? So Ind AS 115 have no sections. That means a single model applies to all kinds of revenues, whether it is service, whether it is construction contract, or it is goods. Okay? In a sense, what we are saying is, even for goods, in certain cases, you will have to follow percentage or proportionate completion method. We'll discuss how, when. For construction contract, you anyways followed percentage completion method, but when you come to Ind AS 115, there will be certain construction contracts where you will not be allowed to do that because they are not essentially construction. It's like delivery of goods. For example, real estate entities. So most of the real estate entities are now following completed contract method because they are following in Ind AS 115. Then in services, again, yes, depending on the services, you will have to decide whether it will be percentage completion, completed contract. So there is no two models, there is a single model. Timing of revenue will depend upon whether it is at a point in time or it is over a period of time. So if the transfer of control, so this standard talks about control and not risk and rewards. Risk and rewards is an indicator of control, yes. Based on risk and rewards model, whereas inventory was based on control model. You can recognize inventory when you get control over those goods and services. So inventory was based on control model, revenue was based on risk and rewards model. There could be certain scenarios where risk and rewards so there's someone who's written that not able to listen voice. I hope people are able to listen to voice. It is only specific. I don't know, your speaker may be an issue. Can some more people comment on the box and confirm whether?
Yes, sir. We are getting your voice.
Okay. Thank you. PPT is not moving because I am giving introduction. Okay, so once my introduction is over, we'll start with the PPT. So
yeah,
I was saying,
people are writing. We are fine. We are fine. It's okay. People are writing in comment box. So I think we should go ahead.
sure, yes. So I was trying to say that inventory was based on control model, revenue was based on risk and rewards model. Now, because of this, it might so happen that sometimes risk and rewards may get transferred, but control may not get transferred, and hence there will be some time period where revenue is recognized and inventory is not recognized, or it may be vice versa, wherein revenue is recognized but inventory is not recognized. Hence, there was always this, lacuna in the entire set of standards because two standards are talking different language. Okay? Now, since all my assets are based on control model only, you could not have changed the standard on inventory, and hence the standard on revenue was revised, and this standard is based on control model. That means you recognize revenue when control of the goods and services is transferred to the customer. Now you look at it from the customer's perspective. That means it has to be transferred to the customer, or customer gains control over the goods or services. So that is the time customer recognizes inventory, and that is the time you will recognize revenue. Okay, so it's not about I have transferred the control, whether customer has received or not, I don't care. No, you will have to see from customer's perspective. If customer has gained control over the goods and services, then you can recognize revenue, and that is the same exact time when customer recognizes inventory. So that model has changed completely. So now when you recognize revenue for goods, services, construction contract, anything, you see whether control is transferred at a point in time or in some of the transactions, the control would be transferred over a period of time. For example, if there's a person who provides you services of cleaning. Now every day the cleaning happens. Hence, the control of the services is getting transferred on daily basis. So revenue would be recognized based on time period or number of days basis. So that is the background of this standard. This standard is a very huge standard. Normally AS9 would be what, 10-15 pages standard. IAS 18 standard was little more example, so it was maybe a 25 pages standard. Ind AS 115 is a 150 pages standard. So many people call it a framework rather than a simple standard. It's so huge a standard and so descriptive a standard that it sounds like a framework. Okay. Let's start with the standard now. The scope of the standard has two parts. Okay. One is the contract with customer for your sale of goods or services, but it also covers sale of your fixed assets, sale of your property, plant and equipment. So this standard covers both. Again, sale of property, plant and equipment is also based on control, and hence this standard could provide answer to that as well. So instead of now going to fixed asset standard to decide when the sale happens, this standard will tell you when the sale happens. Okay. Then this standard does not cover leasing contracts, insurance contracts. Leasing contracts, you have standard on leases. Insurance contract, because you have different standard, IFRS 4, and now there is a new standard which will come up, IFRS 17 on insurance. Financial instruments will get covered by financial instrument standard. There are certain non-monetary exchanges like share-based payment and all, which will get covered by share-based payment standards. And then there is certain put options on sale and repurchase agreement. Now, put option and sale and repurchase agreement is when I sell and I give a put option to customer. That means customer can sell it back to me at a fixed price whenever the customer wants. Now, these transactions may be classified as a financing transaction, and if it's a financing transaction, you have to go to standard on financial instruments and not on this standard. So those particular agreements are scoped out of the standard. Let's come to the model, how to recognize revenue, or when to recognize revenue, how much to recognize revenue. So core principle of the standard is revenue. You have to recognize revenue to depict transfer of goods and services to the customer. Okay, and the measurement should be at an amount that reflects the consideration to which you expect to be entitled to in exchange for those goods and services. Okay, so that means you have to recognize revenue at a point in time when the transfer of goods and services happen, and the measurement will be that amount which you think you are entitled to for selling these goods and services. So the measurement is based on your expectation of consideration. Okay. So there are 5 steps in this standard. Step number 1 is you identify the contract. If there are multiple contracts, then multiple contracts, otherwise a single contract. Then you identify what are your performance obligations in the contract. Performance obligation essentially is what all goods or services you have to transfer. Okay, so each distinct goods or services will become a distinct performance obligation. We'll discuss what is distinct, how to identify how many performance obligations are there. But once you decide, for example, I have to give machine, I have to do installation, I have to do maintenance services. So for now, assume that these are 3 performance obligations: giving machine, doing installation, and then doing maintenance. Okay, then you have to determine the transaction price for these all 3 performance obligations, or what is the total transaction price for the contract as a whole. Okay. For that, you will have to consider financing element. If he has paid you in advance, then you have to consider interest expense. If he is going to pay you he is going to enjoy a credit period, then you will have interest income. There might be variable consideration. Variable consideration means there might be some, based on certain events. For example, if the machine performs really good, then he will pay you something more, something like a bonus. Then you will have to consider that. So there would be certain complications in the transaction price we'll have to determine. Then whatever transaction price you determine, you will have to allocate in the performance obligation. So if my total transaction price is 100, out of 100, how much is for machine, how much is for your installation, how much is for maintenance. So you'll have to split that 100 into amount for each performance obligation, and then recognize that portion when the performance obligation is satisfied. For example, if I've delivered the machine, so if 60 is allocated to machine, I will recognize 60 as revenue. Then I do installation. So installation is complete, I recognize another 10. And then I do maintenance. So maintenance is for 3 years. So every year I recognize 10. So likewise, revenue recognition of 100 will be done. So you break everything up into minor, small pieces. Then you allocate revenue to each of the small piece. And then you recognize that portion of revenue when that small piece is completed. So likewise, the standard has these 5 steps. Free to ask any questions. Right? If any questions you have, please feel free to ask. Let's go to step number 1, which is identifying the contract. Now it says that contract has to be enforceable. When is a contract enforceable? When it is written in Indian Contracts Act, you are allowed even oral contracts. So oral contract or implied contracts. So it has to be written, oral or implied, but it must meet certain specific criteria. What is the criteria? Who is the seller? Who is the buyer? What is the transaction price? So those all things should be clear, which is part of a contract. Those all items must be clear. Yeah. Then it says, if either of the parties can cancel the contract, that means both the parties can cancel the contract without any significant penalty. When I say penalty, it has to be material or significant. A penalty of 1 rupee is no penalty, right? So that 1 rupee may be immaterial. So it has to be material or significant penalty. So if either of the parties or both the parties can cancel the contract without any significant penalty, then there is no contract. There are some questions whether this 5-step rule apply corresponding to service recipient as well at the same time when we are applying for seller. No, this 5-step rule only applies to the seller. So this is standard on revenue recognition, Saurabh. So this will only apply to the seller. It is basically seller deciding how to recognize, how much to recognize, and when to recognize revenue. Okay. Then there is a question, as per sale bill, the revenue should be recognized or not, if you are having contract or not. So mainly we'll come to those specific questions. For example, in one of the examples, I've mentioned that a PO, a purchase order, is like a contract, because purchase order would mention the commodities. I mean, what is the commodity, quantity, amount, seller, buyer. So all those things are mentioned in a purchase order. So normally a purchase order can be taken as a contract. Okay. Then what if goods transfer from factory on 31st but received by the buyer on 2nd? So let's come to those specific questions towards the end of the standard, because when we go through the standard, yes, so Rahul is correctly saying. So let's put some of the questions to the back when we are going after we have done through the standards, because then you will understand how to recognize, when to recognize. Okay. So to answer Rahul and Giriraj, I am taking questions during the topic, because sometimes what happens is, if there's a question in your mind and you don't get answers to immediately, sometimes the mind gets stuck to the question and you are not able to concentrate on remaining part of the session, and hence wanted to take questions which are related to the topic which I have already covered. Anyways, we'll take only few questions after every topic, so that we don't break the link also, and the questions are answered also. Okay, so I was saying a contract is when the rights, obligations, the parties, everything is identified. It should not be cancelable by any party at any point in time without any penalty, because then that contract does not make sense. Okay, So in fact, you will find that most of the contracts are always cancelable at any point in time, unless at least one party has done their part. For example, I may issue a PO to you, that purchase order, that saying that you provide me 100 goods. Okay. Now, after 5 minutes, so this is a contract, right? After 5 minutes, I come back to you saying that sorry, I sent by mistake. Please consider that PO is cancelled. Now, if within 5 minutes or within that time between giving the PO and cancelling the PO, if you have already ordered goods or done some activity, you may say, sorry, sir, I have done this thing, because of which I want you to, compensate me, because I have already taken certain actions based on your PO. So this PO is non-cancelable now because I have done my part. Okay. So then it becomes non-cancelable and then it becomes a contract. But suppose you have not taken any action based on my PO, because I have come back to you very quickly that please cancel. In that case, that PO is not a contract because none of the parties have performed their part. Okay, so that's how you have to see whether this is enforceable, non-enforceable, cancelable, non-cancelable, cancelable with penalty, without penalty. Then that will determine whether this is a contract or not. Okay, a contract exists if collection of consideration is probable. If collection itself is not probable, revenue does not make sense. Okay, you will not recognize revenue only to de-recognize it later or book a loss later. Does not make any sense. Okay, so collection has to be probable. Rights to goods and services is identified. What is my right? For example, in-court terms are mentioned in the contract. So that is when the rights transfer. Okay, payment terms can be identified. Both the parties approve it or say they are okay with the terms. Okay, they sign off or they say okay or whatever. Sometimes PO, when it is sent from official ID and if it is received and acknowledged, it is considered as okay from both the sides. Okay, and it has commercial substance. So commercial substance also is important. If there is no commercial substance, there is no contract. So that's how you identify the contract. I'll consider some one or two questions on this. So I understand that steps applies to all revenue, sales, renting, interest, dividend. Is my understanding correct? Yes, Vishal. Steps applies to all. However, you have to be mindful here that interest is now covered by financial instrument standard. Dividend is also covered by financial instrument standard. So something which is not covered by other standard is covered here. Renting is covered by leasing standard. So you will have to see which standard it applies to. But if something is covered in 115, whether it is goods, it is services, software, real estate, all those will apply the same 5-step model. Okay. Then question is, revenue recognition for real estate is based on percentage or project completion base? So Sanket, we will answer that question at a later point in time. How you will apply revenue recognition standard. We are just at the start of the standard, so please hold on to that question. What is commercial substance? Commercial substance is, if I were to sell you a car, okay, a car having market value or a normal price, arm's length price of 1 lakh, but I sell you at 1 rupee, it will not make any sense. So commercial substance is two unrelated party to do a arm's length transaction, then it has a commercial substance. A related party, if they don't do an arm's length transaction, they do a transaction at 1 rupee, then there is no commercial substance. Sometimes to understand commercial substance, you will have to merge 2-3 contracts. In one contract, I may be paying you 20 rupees extra. So in another contract, I ask for a discount of 20. You will have to read both the contracts together to understand the commercial substance of this contract. So commercial substance is basically, it should make sense commercially. It should be arm's length, unrelated parties, fair price. Those aspects make it a commercial substance. Okay. Mahendra, to your question, let's not get into specific, right? Like I'm saying to everyone, let's first understand the standard. Then we'll go to specific software, real estate. Those questions I will answer only later point in time. In the cancelable sales order, if it's cancelable by either parties, both the parties without any penalty, it's not a contract. But to just answer the question, my slide says it, is purchase order a contract? Okay. The purchase order from customers generally would satisfy the following things, which is it is enforceable right and obligation. It specifies which goods to be transferred, the rights like Incoterms and all, transaction price. It is between unrelated parties and fair price and all that stuff, so commercial substance. And customer have the ability and intent to pay the amount to which the company will be entitled to. If it fulfills all these conditions, which it normally does, then even a PO is a contract. Okay. So Varsha, if there is a contract which is signed between two parties that you will deliver goods to me, okay, at 100 rupees, but before delivery, unless you deliver, okay, till the date of delivery, I can cancel at any point in time without giving any penalty, okay, or without paying you anything. Or you can also decide to not deliver, you know, anything to me without paying any penalty. If both the parties are free to go their ways, okay, without any significant penalty, that means they can cancel at any point in time, then it's not a contract. But the moment you deliver the goods, then I am bound to make the payment, accept the goods, you know, all that stuff. Then the contract becomes enforceable at that point in time, and then it becomes a contract. So till the moment a contract is cancelable by both the parties without penalty, it is not a contract. Okay, it's like a MOU can be cancelled at any point in time. So MOU will not be considered as contract, kind of. Okay. Me too, for your question, PO never indicates penalty. So sometimes, you know, a PO will always have terms and conditions at the bottom in very fine print. Okay. If it does not specifically cover penalty and if it is not backed by a contract, then there is no penalty. And if there is no penalty, then PO is understood to be cancelable. If it's cancelable, then it's not a contract. So you'll have to see it in overall sense. Okay. A quotation is never a contract because quotation is one-sided. The other party has not accepted it. A quotation is only, you know, giving one-sided. So quotation is not a contract. It has to be accepted by both the parties. Okay, now let's go to step number 2, which is identifying the performance obligations. How many performance obligations are there in a contract? Okay, to identify that, the standard gives two-step model. The first step is the items mentioned in the contract or the performance obligations mentioned in the contract are capable of being distinct. Capable of being distinct means what? Means suppose I am selling you a car. Okay, now every part of a car can anyways be purchased by anyone from the market also. For example, you can only purchase tires if you want, you can only purchase engine if you want, you can only purchase the windshields or the bonnet or the metal part, or I don't know. So you can almost purchase every part of the car from the market anyways. Okay, so every part of the car is capable of being distinct. Correct? So even if I am selling you a car, every part, every spare, everything in that car is capable of being distinct. Okay, customer can benefit from individual goods or service on its own, or customer can use the goods or service with other readily available resources. For example, you know, if I have a car, I need tire, I can just purchase tire and fit the tire. So a tire can also give me benefit in itself, right? So first step is whether each part which you are delivering or every promise that you have made, is it distinct in itself or not, or capable of being distinct. But the second step, see, on when both the steps, after second step you will decide how many performance obligation is there. So second step is you have to focus on whether the good or service is distinct in the context of the contract. So one is whether it is capable of being distinct. Second is whether intention was of making it distinct. Now when I sell you a car, my intention is not to sell 1,000 parts in that car. My intention is to sell you a single car. Then I will not say I have 1,000 performance obligation. I will say I have only single performance obligation to deliver car. Okay, so good or service is not integrated with highly dependent on, highly interrelated with, or significantly modifying or customizing other promised goods or services in the contract. Okay, then it is distinct. To give you another example, okay, I sell you lift in a building. So I sell you a lift. You ask me to install, and that installation is a significant activity. So I will sell you a lift and I will also install it for you. Okay. In that case, you will have to see whether lift and installation are two different activities or a single activity. Now that also depends upon the terms of the contract. So one is, yes, lift can be sold and you can get it installed from any other service provider. But is the intention of the contract to give two different services or a single service? If I everywhere where I talk in the contract, I talk about both selling the lift and installation, you have no option to only purchase lift or only do installation. You will have to take both from me or nothing from me. Okay. So those are the indicators which will tell you whether lift and installation are two obligations or a single performance obligation. Then third could be maintenance. Okay. So it could be possible that selling lift and installation is a single performance obligation, but maintenance you have option. You can take it from me or you can take it from anyone else. For example, if you purchase a car, okay, now where to get the car serviced, you have option. You can get the car serviced from your car manufacturer, or you can get the car serviced from, there are various service providers to service your car. So servicing of a car may be a separate performance obligation, whereas the car is a separate performance obligation. So that is how you decide how many performance obligations are there in a contract. In practical life, most of the companies, what they say is, there is goods which is there, and then there is a delivery which you do. For example, it is free on board, or it is based on your Incoterms. Okay, it may be CIP, various Incoterms you have. Now, most of the companies, they take a stand that the goods are sold on Ex Works basis, and the delivery is acting like an agent. So delivery is a separate performance obligation, goods is a separate performance obligation. You have option that you can purchase Ex Works from me and get your delivery from by yourself, or you can appoint a third party to get the delivery done. So delivery is not a mandatory part of my contract. You want me to deliver, I will do it. You want delivery to be done by a third party or yourself, you can do it that way also. So hence, goods is a separate performance obligation, delivery is a separate performance obligation. Likewise, they split the contract into goods and delivery. So that's the practical side of things. So similarly, every contract you will have to break into multiple performance obligations. There's an example for this. An entity enters into a contract to manufacture and install customized equipment and provide maintenance services for 3-year period. Installation services include integration of multiple pieces of that equipment at the customer's facility for that equipment to operate, as a single unit. Equipment cannot operate without installation. So installation is a significant activity for that equipment. See, there are equipments like television. Now television may be installed, but then the television, you can get installation from anyone. It's not a complicated installation. Okay. Whereas, there might be some machines which are so huge, the installation would actually be complicated. So you'll have to see whether installation is complicated, not complicated, can be done by anyone, or it is actually getting the parts and assembling it within your factory. If it's assembling it within your factory, then it becomes an essential part of that agreement or the contract. So entity sells equipment and installation services together, okay, and does not sell installation separately. So again, equipment installation could be capable of being distinct, but in the essence of this contract, it is a single performance obligation. Other vendors can provide the installation services, and the maintenance services are sold separately. So there are 3 parts to this: equipment, installation, maintenance. If you see equipment capable of being distinct, step 1, good cannot be used without installation, but customer can obtain installation from any other source. So it is a distinct, or it is capable of being distinct. In step 2, whether it is distinct from the contract's perspective. Because equipment and installation are highly interrelated, significant customization is required during installation. Okay, and hence it is not distinct in the essence of the contract. So equipment and installation will be considered as a single performance obligation. Same thing is mentioned in the installation tab. I'll go to the third one, maintenance. Services have a distinct function because they are sold separately. Okay, so maintenance will always be at least in step one, it will be a distinct. In step two, because this is not highly interrelated, no integration, modification, customization required, and hence it is distinct. So in this example, there are two performance obligations. One is equipment and installation, and second is maintenance. Any questions on this? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead. Step number 3 is determining the transaction price. Now, transaction price is defined as, okay, there is a question. In some case, free services are provided. What about that? So, Shikha, you will have to go by the assumption that nothing is free. Everything is chargeable. So, in step 2, it only requires you to split the performance obligations. I will come to the transaction price and allocation. Okay, so let's wait for step 3 and step 4 to happen, and you will get the answer for what happens to free services. If not, I will answer your question then. But step 2 is only about breaking. So for now, to answer your question, you break into what is given free also. For example, a company may give maintenance as free. Okay, for now you consider as maintenance as a performance obligation. So step 2, decide whether maintenance is a separate performance obligation or not. Stop at that. Wait for step 4, then you get your answer. Thanks, Vishal, for that. Narendra, what is reason to distinguish such services with goods? So Narendra, the essential point of the entire standard is recognize revenue when you have right to receive the money, when you have performed your part, and control is transferred. Because you have to come up to such accurate point in time, you need to break your contract into multiple parts. Normally, what would you do? Normally, companies do what, under at least under accounting standards, company used to book the entire revenue as soon as the goods were delivered, and then make a provision for installation cost, maintenance cost. So entire revenue is recognized, entire cost is recognized, entire profit is recognized. By breaking the contract into multiple performance obligations and then allocating transaction price and recognizing revenue, I am deferring recognition of revenue and recognition of cost, and hence recognition of profits. So timing is the most important thing in the standard, and measurement. That is what the standard tries to answer by doing it. Shubham, I cannot compare with AS9. This is completely different standard. AS9 was very simple standard. This standard is much more complicated, much more detailed than AS9. Broadly, AS9, like I said, was based on goods were different, services were different, risk and rewards was the criteria. Here, control is the criteria. There's so many differences that 2 hours I can only talk on differences. So let's not get into difference. Let's understand this standard. Then Minesh has a question. In this example, we'll recognize revenue after installation is done. So Minesh, see, when to recognize revenue, I will come to point number 5, step number 5. Let's wait. Let's hold on to that. Let's go stepwise. Let's understand there are multiple performance obligations first. Then we'll go to how to recognize revenue. What happens to sale on CIF basis? Will transport and sale be 2 different POs? So yes, there is no common answer, but like I said, that you will have to determine whether transportation is separate performance obligation or not. Normally, if it is not mandatory for the customer to purchase transportation from you, they can do as X works. Then transportation will be a separate performance obligation. Then you will also have to see whether transportation is like an agent or like a principal. Are you acting as a principal for delivering goods, or are you acting as an agent? I will come to all those complications later on. For now, transportation can be a different performance obligation. Okay. If transaction price is based on milestone, whether management estimate can be considered. This is a step later on, Jimmy. I will not answer this right now. And if maintenance clause is mandatory in the agreement, what happens? So generally, Meenakshi, you will have to see you know, see, imagine a contract in the real world. Okay, why will someone do a maintenance mandatory in the agreement? Okay, if it's really mandatory, then you know it's difficult now for me to answer because this does not look real. But if it's there, then you will have to split the revenue. We'll come to how revenue is recognized, but you will have to consider a single performance obligation. Okay. But generally, it will not be mandatory. The contracts are not structured in this way. Okay, let's go to step number 3. Transaction price. Transaction price is defined as the amount of consideration to which an entity expects to be entitled in exchange for transferring promised goods or services. Okay. To explain in a simple term, this standard uses lot of complicated terms like performance obligation, distinct, at a point in time, over a period of time, many complicated words. So we'll have to understand in depth this point on transaction price. It says that what do you think you are entitled to for selling the goods and services? Okay. That is the transaction price. So if I sell at 100, then I feel I am entitled to 100, and hence 100 is the consideration or 100 is the transaction price. Okay. Now, why is it talking about expects to be entitled to? Okay, it talks about expectation of entitlement because sometimes it may happen that you may feel that correct revenue is 80. I think this person always asks for a discount. Even after issuing invoice, it will say, I don't have capability, please give me discount, please give me this, please. It starts bargaining later on. So I may sell at 100, but I feel 80 is a good price. I may give a discount of 20 later on. So my revenue is 80. So you will have to see what do you expect you are entitled to for selling these goods and services. That much is the revenue you are talking about. You may invoice 100, you may invoice 60, whatever you invoice, revenue recognition will be based on how much you expect you are entitled to, and you feel probable that the customer will pay to you. Okay. So it should reflect the following things: variable consideration. We'll talk in detail about these topics, but the first one is variable consideration. Variable consideration essentially is discounts, commission, penalties, bonus, multiple terms which you may use, but your consideration will change in future depending upon your performance. So that is variable consideration. Then there might be significant financing component. So if a person has given you an advance, now AS9 never spoke about financing component. Ind AS 18, the earlier version of revenue standard in IFRS, Ind AS 18 always spoke about financing element in a credit transaction, wherein I sell for a credit. Okay, so payment will come after 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. At that point, what to do? This standard also covers advance payment. So there are so many transactions. For example, you may have heard jewelry retailers. They may say that you give me advance for 11 months, and at the end of 12th month, you take so say monthly 100 rupees you give me for 11 months. At the end of 12th month, you can purchase anything for 1200. So you have paid 1100, you get goods of 1200. What is the remaining 100? It is nothing but financing cost for the seller. So that recognition is for the first time spoken about in Ind AS 115. Earlier standards never spoke about what to do for that 100. There were various accounting treatments which was being done. So significant financing component can be both sides: interest income, interest expense. If the credit period or the advance period is material, the interest element is material, significant, you need to account for it. Okay. Then consideration paid to a customer. Sometimes the seller may pay something to the customer. Okay, it's like commission. Okay, in case seller pays something to a customer, then that is reduced from revenue. That is not booked as a cost, that is booked as revenue. Now here you have to understand difference between a customer and a dealer distributor. Okay, if your revenue is recognized when the goods are sold to distributor, then distributor is actually your customer. Okay, you may call it distributor in your supply chain thing, but in accounting terms, that distributor is your customer. Okay, if that distributor is your agent and you recognize revenue when the distributor finally sells to the retailer or sells to the ultimate customer, then that distributor is your agent, then that distributor is not your customer. But if you consider that distributor to be principal, then that distributor is your customer. If you pay any commission to the distributor who is your customer, then that is reduced from revenue. So that's an example of consideration paid to a customer. Then if it's a non-cash consideration, you will have to consider fair value. So for example, I sell you goods and instead of returning or giving me consideration in cash, you give me your goods. Okay. In that case, you will have to go by fair value. Fair value of what? Fair value of what you receive is your revenue. So whatever customers pays you in non-cash consideration, its fair value is what is your revenue. Okay. So again, there are some questions on this slide. Vishal is asking, what if later discount is not given? If discount is not given later on, Vishal, then you will recognize higher revenue at that point in time. Today, the revenue will be based on the probabilities and the expectation and the estimate may keep changing, and hence revenue will keep, you will recognizing plus or minus at that point in time. And Amit's question is, in case of testing equipment, the machine is sold and then servicing of machine and reagents used for testing is also sold over the contract, and then a buyback price is also there for machine at the end of the contract. So Amit will discuss specific transactions later on. For now, you may say that machine and the reagents and servicing, all those are different performance obligations. There are many questions. Significant financing component, do period more than or equal to 1 year or only to be assessed? So Saurabh, see, 1 year is a benchmark, you may say, but it has to be materiality or significant amount is what you will have to consider to decide whether you need to account for it or not. Amount is material or not will depend upon company to company and transaction to transaction. The standard is principle based. Standard never says 1 year. Generally, it is taken as 1 year because it may not be material otherwise. But if it is material, you need to account. Commission paid to CFA agent who is also a distributor, whether bullet 3 for consideration paid to a customer applied. We do again. You cannot generalize this thing. Sometimes what happens is CFA agent is considered as a customer by a company, saying that risk and rewards are of CFA agent. Once I have delivered the goods to the CFA agent, whether CFA agent is able to sell it, not able to sell it, the loss is all of CFA agent. I will not take the goods back. Okay. If all the risk rewards control is transferred to the CFA agent and he's not acting as an agent, he's acting as a principal, then that CFA agent is my principal. Okay, or a customer. If he is my customer, then consideration paid to a customer will apply. Okay. Then is notional interest which is lost during credit period given to customer recognized as finance cost? Notional interest lost during a credit period, finance cost, no, Nikunj, that's not how this transaction happens. It's not about notional interest lost. If I give a credit period, I have right to receive interest for that credit period, and that interest will be recognized as separate interest income. Okay, so if the customer pays me 100, okay, I will first compare with what I will get if I had not given a credit period, 0-day credit period, cash sales. If cash sales happens at 90, generally, see, it will not happen at same price every time. You'll have to see a range. If the cash sales happens at 90, then you will say that 90 is the fair value of the goods and 10 is interest income. So 10 you will recognize as interest income over a period of time. Notional finance cost is not what you recognize. There's a way different from AS9. Okay, and this was established in IFRS in IAS 18 also, and hence I'm not dwelling too much into this principle. This principle is already there in IAS 18. It is not come because of IFRS 15. But there is no notional finance cost which is recognized. So Pooja, I have answered your question, I think, about commission paid to customer. Breakage charges has to be reduced from sale price. So Sumesh, whatever you pay to your customer in whatever form, discount, charges, penalty, blah blah blah, you will have to reduce from sales. Delayed payment charges should be part of revenue, or delayed payment is interest income, so interest income. If Ashish's question, if I myself expect lower amount to which I am entitled, then wouldn't it violate the contract as there was no consensus between the parties? No, Ashish, consensus was there between the parties of 100. It is my expectation. Accounting is based on management estimates and judgment. Contract is based on legality. So legality is 100, expectation is 80. So these are two different things. In case of warranties and extended warranties, how it is considered in transaction price? So Khushbu, transaction price, you will have to see fair value of extended warranties. Okay, what I would charge generally for selling extended warranty separately, and I'll come to that. So there are examples on that. Sold, return back after goods expired company. So sales and return basis we'll come to again later point in time. See, there are too many questions. I don't know. I'm lost in so many questions now. What we can do is, after some point in time, we can again take questions, or maybe people can email me, because now there's so many questions that I'm getting lost now. So let's go ahead. Okay. So variable consideration, common examples of variable consideration is performance bonus, incentive payments, penalties, refunds, market-based fees, discounts, returns, money back guarantees. So many names you can call it. Okay, anything which you pay to a customer, or anything which is variable, is variable consideration. Discount is one of the major examples of variable consideration. If I have a term wherein, say, on 31st March or 25th March I make a sale, I give a credit period of 30 days, and if the customer pays me before that 30 days, he will get a discount of 10%. And if the customer pays me at the end of 30 days or after 30 days, then there is no discount which the customer gets. Okay. Now, if that is the kind of transaction, and that is a normal transaction, okay, so you will have to estimate how much discount will I give. That means how many customers will pay within 30 days and avail the cash discount. How many customers will not pay within 30 days and hence not avail the cash discount. Based on that, you will estimate an amount and reduce it from revenue. Okay. Now, naturally, actual transaction, when it happens, you will come to know only at the end of 30 days, and that is the time you will know actually whether customer has availed the cash discount or not. Okay, and then the difference, if any, will be reduced or increased, credited or debited in revenue after 30 days. Today, I will reduce from revenue based on my estimate. For example, if I've made 100 sales, okay, in last 10 days of March or last 15 days of March, okay, and I expect out of that 100, at least 30 customers will avail cash discount. Then I will estimate the amount and reduce from sale today itself. That means in 31st March, my balance sheet, I will reduce my sales to the extent of those 30 customers availing discount. In April, I will actually come to know whether the number of customers is 30, 10 or 40, whatever the the actual number may be. Because at the time of actual, I will have to actualize it. That actualization will be reflected in my revenue in April. That means if 30 becomes 40, I will reduce revenue by 10 customers in April. If 30 becomes only 20, then I will have to record more revenue, but that will also happen in April. Okay. So that is how variable consideration works. To extend my example of that distributor, sometimes when distributors are your customer, okay, so for example, when I deliver my goods to the distributor, I don't take it back. All control, risk, rewards, everything is transferred to the distributor. Distributor can never return the goods back to me. Okay, and the payment is made by the distributor, and then distributor sells it further. So I decide that as per Ind AS 115, distributor is actually my customer. Now what I do is I sell my goods to distributor which are having MRP of 100. That means distributor can sell it at 100. I sell to distributor at say 85, and then based on number of goods that distributor has purchased, I give incremental discount to the distributor. That means if distributor purchases 1000 goods, he gets 5% discount. If he purchases 1500, he gets 6%. If he purchases 2000, he gets 7%. Likewise, my discount increases with the number of units the distributor purchases. So this is an incentive payment system or kind of performance bonus. In this case, I estimate how many goods will the distributor sell. Based on my estimate, I recognize revenue today. Okay, so today he has purchased only 10 goods, but if I expect him to be applicable of 7% discount, then I already give, for accounting purpose, I allow him 7% discount. Actual transaction I may not do at 7% discount, because that he will get at a later point in time when he crosses the threshold. But for accounting, I will have to record 7% discount today itself. Finally, he may be eligible for 8%, 6%, 5%. That correction I will do, or that estimate change I will do at the point when it actually happens, or when my estimate changes. Okay, this is again an example of variable consideration. Third example which I can give is sales returns. Okay, so again, like cash discount, in last 15 days of March, I sold 100 goods, all which are returnable within 30 days. Okay, my estimate again is 30 people will return the goods. If 30 people will return the goods, I will have to reverse the sales and the cost of sales both in my balance sheet. Okay, so how the transaction will be, I will actually show you an Excel, and I will give journal entries in that Excel for better understanding. Suppose the number of units sold is 100 and cost per unit is say 60 and selling price per unit is say 75. Now I would have recognized revenue and debtors I'd say 100 into 75, and I would have recognized, inventory consumption or cost and cash again at say 100 into 60. Now at the end of the month, I will estimate how many people will return the goods, because all 100 is on return basis. My estimate is 30 people will return the goods. If my estimate is 30 people will return the goods, put debit credit also just for ease of understanding. If my estimate is 30 people will return the goods, my journal entry will be sales or revenue debit to debtors, which will be 30 into 75, because 30 people will return the goods, and then I will also credit cost and debit inventory line with customer of 60 into 30. So this is my asset, this is my P&L reversal, this is my revenue which I will reverse, and my debtors which I will reverse. Okay, so this is how I will record sales return on 31st March on estimate basis. Actual sales return may be really different. Okay, and that actualization will happen in a later period. This is the entry which I will post in the month of March. I hope this is clear. So these are some of the examples of variable consideration. The paragraph below this table, it says the transaction price is estimated using the approach that better predicts the amount to which the company is entitled to. So you will have to estimate the amount that you are entitled to. For example, you feel 70 people will not return the goods, so you are entitled to sales of 70. Okay. Now, how do you decide which method to use to estimate this 30? It says you can go by expected value approach or most likely amount approach. Okay. For example, again, we discussed about a dealer discount based on incremental approach. So what you can do is you can use expected value. Expected value means some of the dealers will get 7%, some of the dealer will get 6%, some of the dealer will get 5%. You apply weighted average and you estimate the expected value. Or there is other way, which is most likely approach. Okay, so most likely amount is basically you plot how many amounts will happen, then you plot the percentages likeliness of that happening, and based on likeliness of that event happening, you estimate the amount. Okay, for example, say in certain cases, say for example refunds. Okay, you may say that 90% probability refund may not happen. If 90% probability refund may not happen, then and if you are using most likely amount as method, then most likely amount is no refund. If no refund, then no accounting. Okay, but then whether to use most likely amount or expected value depends upon the transaction. It does not depend upon your choice. It's not a free choice. So in refunds, normally you will have to go by expected value. Expected value will say that if 10% probability of refund, you account for 10%. You don't account for 90%. Okay, most likely amount method will say that you don't account for any refund. So these are the two approaches, but different transaction you will have to apply different approach based on the nature of the transaction. And you will have to apply the approach you choose consistently. Okay. Next is significant financing component. I discussed that in significant financing component, you will include advance as well. Now, advance or credit period, it is reflected as an adjustment to your transaction price. Means it is an adjustment to your revenue. Okay. Primary purpose of payment terms has to be to provide financing to the party. Okay, whether it is financing to the seller or financing to the buyer. Okay. Evaluation is not required if customer is expected to pay within 1 year of when the controller is transferred. So here it says, see, within 1 year is an estimate or it's a general concept. Okay. You will have to see materiality and significance of the amount to decide whether 1 year is the right period. Okay, but standard generally says that if it is less than 1 year, generally it will not be material. Okay. Then if financing component is not significant to the individual contract, the entity is not required to adjust anything. So you'll have to see whether it is significant or not. For financing rate adjustment, you will have to see borrower's credit risk and the expected term of the financing set at the inception. Okay. So normally you will want to take the normal rate that would have been charged in this transaction. Okay. Generally people consider incremental borrowing rate, some may consider weighted average borrowing rate. There is no clear method, but something which seems more logical or seems more practical and more it's also about materiality. Something not material, you may use WACC or you may use incremental borrowing rate, does not matter much. So you'll have to see what is easier and material and more accurate. Effect of financing to be reflected separately from revenue. It will be in interest income or interest expense, depending upon whether it's an expense or income for you. So it will not be part of revenue from contracts with customer. It will have to be interest income and interest expense. For that, you will have to go to financing financial instrument standard. Okay. So step 4, allocate the transaction price, and this is an interesting chart which I have made so that it makes things easier for you. So you will have to allocate on relative standalone selling prices. So if suppose we identify 3 performance obligations, you will have to identify the standalone selling prices of each performance obligation. Let's go back to our example of say machine installation and your maintenance. Now machine says 1 performance obligation, installation is performance obligation 2, and maintenance is performance obligation 3. You identify the standalone selling price. If I were to sell only machine, I sell at 60. If I were to sell only installation, I sell at 40. And if I were to sell only maintenance, I sell at 30. So if I add 60, 40, 30, it becomes 130, but I have sold at 120. So there is a discount of 10. 10 I will allocate between performance obligation 1, 2 and 3 based on 60:40:30. That ratio I will split the discount of 10. Okay, so that's how the standard says. If the price is observable, simply use the observable price. So 60:40:30, you can simply use observable price. If price is not observable, that means installation I never sell separately. Installation is only sold along with goods. Okay, so you may purchase only goods, you may purchase goods plus installation, you may purchase goods plus installation plus maintenance. Okay, I never sell only installation or only maintenance. So goods or machine price is observable, but installation and maintenance is not observable. In that case, for installation and maintenance, you will have to estimate. How will you estimate? One method is adjusted market assessment approach. That means in market, someone will do installation for 40. Okay, or in market, someone will do maintenance of this machine for 30. So that is adjusted market assessment approach. Why adjusted? Because if market is doing, say, a different quality, I am doing a different quality, then you may adjust it. If the market is doing for a different kind of good, similar but not exactly same goods or machine, then you will have to do some adjustment. So hence it is adjusted market assessment approach. Second approach is expected cost plus margin. So what is your cost of doing installation plus a normal margin which you would expect. Similarly, cost of servicing plus a normal margin which you will estimate. Next is residual. Residual means suppose I can observe for this machine and I can observe for installation. Then what I can do is I can, if residual is a small portion, that means if maintenance is really small in front of machine and installation, then I can use residual approach for that maintenance. So I will say 60 for the machine, 30 for installation and 10 for maintenance. Provided maintenance is really small and insignificant portion. If maintenance is material portion, then I am not allowed to use the residual approach. Residual approach can only be used where it is insignificant portion. Let's take an example. Okay. Now entity sells hardware, professional services, maintenance services for 2 lakh rupees. Now it determines that promised goods or services represent each of them. Hardware is separate, professional services is different, and maintenance services is different. There are 3 performance obligations. Okay. Then it frequently sells professional services and maintenance services on standalone basis. So professional services it sells normally for 25,000. Maintenance services it sells for 15,000. Okay. Hardware it rarely sells on standalone basis, but it can estimate the price of hardware based on cost plus margin approach. So expected cost plus margin approach will say that hardware will be sold for 185. Now all these 3 we have sold for 2 lakh. So estimated standalone selling price hardware 185, professional 25, maintenance 15. You calculate the percentage, then the total discount which you have given is 25,000. So you allocate discount on this percentage and hence you arrive at transaction price. This is how you allocate transaction price to different performance obligations. I hope this is clear again. Let's go to the last step of IFRS 15 or Ind AS 115, which is recognize revenue as and when performance obligations are satisfied. Now it says that revenue is recognized as you satisfy the performance obligation. That means you transfer control of the goods or services to the customer. Okay, goods or services is considered to be transferred when the customer obtains control. So you always see from customer's perspective whether customer has obtained control or not. Performance obligation can be either satisfied over a period of time or at a point in time. Okay, there are 2 things which can happen. Either it is over a period or it is at a particular point in time. Okay. Standard gives certain criteria. We will go through that criteria. Based on that criteria, if that criteria is fulfilled, then it is said to be transferred over a period of time. If none of the criteria is fulfilled, then you assume that it is transferred at a point in time. So it gives three conditions. Okay, any one is fulfilled, it is over a period of time. If none of the three is fulfilled, then it is at a point in time. Okay, let's go through this three conditions. Condition number one. Okay, what is at a point in time or over a period of time? Over a period of time means something like percentage completion method or proportionate completion method. At a point in time is something like completed contract. So a revenue, for example, when you sell machine, when will you recognize revenue? Will you recognize revenue as the machine is being manufactured, or will you recognize revenue when the machine is completely manufactured and control is transferred to the customer? Okay, so so that is how at a point in time and over a period of time this is different. Okay, so let's go to the criteria. The first criteria is entity creates or enhances an asset that the customer controls as it is created or enhanced. The first condition, imagine a construction contract. Okay, I have given a contract to a customer to construct a building for me. Land is mine. The vendor comes and constructs a building for me. Okay, now in that, when it is constructing the building on my land, okay, that entity, the vendor is creating or enhancing my asset that I control. I am a customer now for that vendor. Okay, so it enhances the asset that I control, and as it is created or enhanced. So that means if he is constructed a single floor, okay, he has to construct 4 floors. But if he's constructing pillars, he's constructing 1 floor, 2 floors. As he is creating or constructing the asset or enhancing the asset, I am controlling the enhancement or whatever is happening on that land is my control. Okay, and hence the vendor will recognize revenue over a period of time. That means he will, for example, if he follows cost plus margin approach, every time he incurs a cost, okay, he will recognize revenue of cost plus margin in his books. So he will recognize percentage completion method. In percentage completion, there are various methods. You can apply cost plus margin. You can apply, based on percentage completion. So if one floor is complete and you say that 10% is complete, then the person can recognize, entity can recognize 10% of the total revenue. So input output methods, we'll discuss that later on. But essentially, this slide says that if your first condition is fulfilled, then you recognize revenue over a period of time. Let's go to second condition. The entity's performance does not create an asset with an alternative use, and the entity has right to payment for performance completed to date. Now, let's take an example of say real estate contracts. Now, in real estate contract, if I am constructing a residential building and I have sold one flat, now as soon as I sell one flat, okay, my performance, if I am vendor, I am the real estate developer, my performance does not create an asset with alternative use for me. I cannot use it for anything else because this is as per plan. Even one flat has been sold to a customer, I cannot change the plan, I cannot do anything else with that building. So I am creating an asset which has no alternative use for me, and I have right to payment as the performance is completed. Okay, so one floor is completed, I will ask for some payment. 2 floors are completed, I will ask for some payments. So again, percentage completion method. So I'm giving an example of real estate developers, but real estate developers get stuck into one of the conditions, which is, do you have right to payment? Because these real estate contracts are cancelable, customer can cancel. It's like return, sales return basis. Okay, customer can cancel the contract, and mostly with a small penalty, the builder will have to return back the amounts. The builder will not be able to recognize revenue until the project is completed. So most of the builders get stuck into that clause. If that clause is not applicable to a builder, they can follow percentage completion. But if that clause is applicable to a builder, that means he will have to return back the money whenever customer cancels. Then the real estate developer will have to follow completed contract. But just to understand this condition, I am giving example of real estate developer. Okay. The third one is customer is receiving and consuming the benefits of the entity's performance as the entity performs. Best example is what we are doing right now. Okay, for example, if this I am earning revenue, suppose, just for example, although I'm not doing that, but suppose I'm earning revenue and I'm giving a session to you, okay, webinar to you. Now that means as and when I am performing, you are consuming. So customer is receiving and consuming the benefits of my performance as I am performing. Okay, so I will recognize revenue based on minutes of performance. So if this is for 2 hours, or suppose this course is for 10 hours, I deliver 1 minute, I can recognize, theoretically I can recognize revenue every minute. Okay, so this is the third condition. Now if I were to talk about, say, a software industry where the entity is creating a software and selling the software. Okay, if I am creating a software specific to a company, okay, then I may say the first condition that I'm creating or enhancing an asset that a customer controls only if the software is being created on server of the customer. If software is created on my server, then the first condition will not be applicable because customer is not controlling the half created software. Correct? If suppose on the other hand, customer already owns a software and I am modifying the software or installing the software on the customer server, then I am creating or enhancing an asset that the customer already controls. Correct? So then the first condition will be applicable. So second condition, okay, I am creating a very specialized software for the customer and I have no alternative use. I cannot sell it to anyone else. I can only sell it to that customer. Okay, because that it is made for that customer and that customer only. Okay, no one other than that customer will have use for this software. For example, a website, a portal. If I am creating a very specific portal for a customer, that portal cannot be used by anyone else, right? I cannot sell that portal to anyone else. Then I am creating a set which has no alternative use for me, and then I can charge for every minute spent or every hour spent to the customer. I will say, if the customer wants to cancel the contract today in half done software, I will say I have spent 80 hours, you pay me for 80 hours. Okay, so then the second condition is fulfilled. For second condition, one more example will be in automotive industry. You know, there are tools which are made or molds which are made. Okay, now molds may be controlled by customer. In that case, as and when I'm making that mold, okay, I have no alternative use because this is specific to that car company only, specific to that brand only. This cannot be used by any brand, any other brand or any other car company. Okay, so I have no alternative use for that mold. Okay, and I have right to payment as and when I am, performance completed to that. So if 60% mold is completed and the contract gets cancelled, I can ask the customer to pay 60%. In that case, the second condition is fulfilled. Okay. Again, the most important part is this right to payment for performance completed to that, and this is where I said that most of the real estate companies will fail, because right to payment will not happen if the customer cancels the contract. They will have no small penalty they will pay, but they will have no other payments to be made, and hence this will fail. But for other contracts, we will have to see, and hence I gave, at the start of the standard, I gave an example saying that even for goods or machines or for normal your goods, you may have percentage completion method, which I just explained in molds. It's a good, right? So if I'm selling molds, and if it's a specialized mold or it's a customized mold, and if I have right to payment for whatever performance I've completed to date, I will fall in the second criteria and have to mandatorily recognize revenue over a period of time. Over a period of time means if as on 31st March 60% mold is completed, I will recognize 60% revenue. I hope this is clear again. Okay. If none of the three conditions are fulfilled, then the standard says you recognize revenue only at the end when the control is transferred. Okay, control will be transferred when the mold is given to the customer. Now, control is not necessarily possession. Control means who decides what to do with the mold, whether to sell it in the same condition, how much to sell, whom to sell, how to use, when to use. Those decision making is control. Who makes those decisions about that goods and services? If that decision can be made by the customer has control. If decision is being made by me, then I have control. So essentially, control is basically decision making power. Who has that decision making power about those goods? Now it says if none of the criteria which we mentioned in the previous slide, the 3 criteria, if none of them are fulfilled, okay, then the entity will recognize revenue at a particular point in time. The point in time is when the control is transferred. Indicators of control is customer has present obligation to pay, customer has physical asset, customer has legal title, customer has risk and rewards, and customer has accepted the asset. Okay. See, most important point is the last line, which says none of the indicators are individually determinative. That means just because a customer has legal title, I will not say control has transferred, or other way around. Just because a customer does not have legal title, I cannot say control has not been transferred. A control may be transferred without legal title being transferred. Correct? Or it may be other way also. I have raised an invoice, legal title is transferred as soon as I raise an invoice, but control is not transferred. You will have to see decision making rights who has. So there can be various possibilities. You cannot individually see these indicators and decide whether control has been transferred or not. You'll have to see as a wholesome. You'll have to see the criteria, conditions, how it is happening. For example, goods are en route. It's on ship. It's going by waterways. Okay. If customer can do high sea sales, that means customer is able to decide about the goods. If customer is able to decide about the goods, then customer is controlling the goods. Another example of in transit is if the seller is acting as an agent. Like I said, delivery of goods can be a separate performance obligation. If delivery of goods is a separate performance obligation, and based on conditions mentioned in the standard about principal and agent, if I am a seller and I decide that I am acting as an agent of the customer for delivering the goods, for example, I prove that when I appoint a agency for delivering goods, a transport company for delivering the goods, the customer has power to choose the transport company. Whether the customer chooses or not, it's his choice, but he has power to decide who is the transport company. Customer can actually call the transport company and reroute the goods. Okay. Customer can give directions to the transport company. Customer can sell the goods in transit. All the risk, if something happens to the goods, loss happens in transit, the risk will be of the customer. Customer will have to pay me. These are the indicators that even if the goods are in transit, I have lost control, customer has gained control, and hence I should recognize revenue. I hope I have explained this well. So these are the 5 conditions which you will have to fulfill. There were certain questions in between about free goods. Now if you give free goods, for example, if you purchase goods from machine from me, installation is free. I said nothing is free. Now if installation is free, you're saying that means essentially this is a single performance obligation in this scenario, because goods and installation are meant to be sold together in this contract. But suppose if I say that you purchase goods from me and get installation, and then maintenance I will do for free. Now if I say that maintenance can be purchased from somewhere else, so maintenance is a separate performance obligation because it does not modify significantly or does any change in the asset or installation. Hence maintenance will be a separate performance obligation. Then I allocate the total price which I get, which includes maintenance, because maintenance is free. So if I've sold machine for 100, maintenance is free. That means I have 2 performance obligation, machine and maintenance, but total consideration is only 100. I will allocate 100 to machine and maintenance. Machine I will recognize revenue when I sell the machine, which is control is transferred, and maintenance I will recognize revenue when maintenance is being done. Okay, so probably maintenance will be over a period of time and machine will be at a point in time. I will split revenue and recognize revenue accordingly for machine and maintenance. Okay, now goods distributed on sample basis for free, that is not sales. If I distribute to free to anyone and everyone, whether they are my customer or not, whether they have contract with me or not, it is not 115, it is not revenue, it is not as per this standard. But if I say that you have to purchase goods worth 100 with me, from me, and then I give you a free goods, then this standard says that you will have to allocate the revenue to free goods and recognize when the control is transferred. So that's how you will have to see. Okay, because we are just half an hour away from 8 o'clock. I'll go to the next topic and then we'll again take remaining questions later. Contract modification. So if there is any modification in the contract, it says there can be 3 situations. Okay, situation number 1, if say there is additional goods or services or additional performance obligation, and the transaction price is also increased, which is fair to the increase in performance obligation. For example, I am selling 100 goods. After a few months or few days, you come back saying that no, you need 120 goods, and the transaction price is also equally increased for 20 goods. Then you take that 20 goods as a separate contract. Okay, so scenario number 1 is if the contract price and the contract performance obligation are both increased equally or in equal proportion, then you take it as a separate contract altogether. Okay. Second scenario can be if only modification in the goods but no modification in the price, then you do a cumulative catch-up adjustment. For example, for 100 rupees I were to give you 10 goods, then we modify the contract and I say that for 100 rupees I'll give you 11 goods. I have already supplied 5 goods. Then I do cumulative catch-up. Cumulative catch-up means for the 6th good I will do 100 upon 11 into 6. 5 goods I have already recognized revenue, 6th one I will do. Let's put it on Excel for ease of it. What is cumulative catch-up? Okay. So for example, revenue or say consideration, let's say consideration is 100. Units were 10. So let's say 20 just for ease of sake. So per unit is 5. I have already sold say 12 units. So I have recognized revenue of 12 into 5, 60. Okay. Then we modify the contract, and we say that units will be increased to 22. So per unit it becomes, well, let's not calculate per unit, but per unit will be say 100 divided by 22, which is 4.55. So if I sell the 13th product now, so how much revenue should I recognize? So revenue should have been recognized as this into this minus 60. So I will recognize this much as revenue. So I will debit this much on the 13th. When I sell 14th, this is how I will calculate. This is called cumulative catch-up. It means 13 into 60 minus what you have already recognized. 13 into 4.4 minus 60. This is the calculation. This is called cumulative catch-up. Okay. And then the third scenario is if distinct goods or services are added and contract price increase, but contract price does not increase in the same proportion in which the original contract was there. In that case, you do accounting for modification prospectively. Let's take another example for this. So this was my original scenario, which is consideration 100, units 20, per unit is 5. Okay, and this is what I have sold and recorded revenue. When I modify, what I do is, when I modify, I increase the unit, and then what I do is I increase the cost of 2 units at 4 rupees. That means total consideration, I say that consideration will now be 108. 108 means what I am doing is for 2 extra units I am giving only 4 rupees extra. Hence 100 has become 108. What I will do is I will modify prospectively. What is prospective modification? I will record what is balance. Balance consideration is 108 minus 60, and balance units is 22 minus 12. Sorry. And hence per unit is 4.8. So now every unit that I sell, I will record 4.8 as revenue. I'll repeat all the three scenarios just for ease of understanding. Scenario number one is, I will mention scenario number one also in this Excel, so comparison becomes very, very easy. Consideration 100, units 20, per unit 5. Then this same scenario here, and then modify. When I say consideration is this into 5. So if consideration is 110, basically I am saying that for 2 units I am again charging 5 rupees. So it says what you do is nothing else to be done. You assume that the 2 units are a separate contract, and for 2 units you are getting 10 rupees. So whenever those 2 units are sold, you recognize revenue of 5 rupees each per unit, and you recognize revenue accordingly. So first is very simple, okay, because you are getting the per unit same even in modification. Second is where number of units has increased but transaction price is not increased, you do a cumulative catch-up adjustment for the remaining units. And third is where revenue means consideration and number of units both have changed, but both have not changed proportionately. Okay, in that case you do prospective change. Prospective modification is balance number of consideration and balance number of units will give you balance per unit. So these are the three scenarios which the standard considers in contract modification. Again, I hope this is clear. We'll go to the next slide. Principal versus agent. There is very nice and very detailed guidance on principal versus agent in Ind AS 115. The standard clearly spells out how will you distinguish a principal from agent. It says when a person or an entity gets control over the goods or services before transferring it to the third party, in that case, you know, if I get momentary control in between, then I am not an agent, I become principal. But if I don't get control in between, okay, in that case I am an agent. For example, like I was saying, a distributor, okay, if the manufacturing company sells goods to me and I get control of those goods, that means I decide the future selling price, I decide whether to sell, not to sell, whom to sell, how to sell, those decisions are being made by me, then I get control and then I'm acting as a principal. But if I don't make such decisions, it is the manufacturer who eventually decides the MRP, who decides whom to sell, how to sell, all those, and he controls everything. Okay, I am just like, you know, a CFA agent in a sense, agent in a sense. In that case, I will be called an agent in the standard also. So it says principal will provide the specified goods or services to a customer and controls goods or service before transferring it to the customer. Whereas agent only arranges for the goods or services to be provided by the manufacturer to the customer. So agent will only be an arranger, whereas principal will take control over the goods in between. That is how you distinguish. But the standard gives actually a very detailed guidance on principal versus agent, and hence the standard is much more clear than the existing AS and Ind AS. So it says identify the specified goods or services to be provided to the customer. You assess whether the agent or the CFA in between, the distributor in between, controls the specified goods or services before it is transferred to the customer. If control is there with the distributor, then the distributor is a principal. If it is not clear whether the distributor has control or not, then assess the three principal indicators. Okay, if the three principal indicators says it has control, then the distributor has control. If there is no control with the distributor, then distributor is acting simply like a agent. Okay, See, risk and rewards is only an indicator of control. It is not a decision making for control. It is one of the indicators of control. But the standard will only talk about the control. Standard will not talk about anything else. Ind AS 115 only talks about control. Last part of the standard, and for the first time the standard includes contract cost. Now if you remember in AS7 construction contract, there was a discussion on cost side, wherein it says that all cost you take it to balance sheet first, and then you amortize or you take the cost to P&L based on percentage of completion method basis. Same thing is spoken about in 115, but a different tone. Okay, it says that you have to see whether the costs are incremental cost as a result of obtaining a contract. Okay, for example, if I enter into contract bidding, and for bidding I incur a lot of expenses like lawyer expenses or some research cost I have done, or all those costs, that cost is not incurred because I have won a contract or is incremental to winning a contract. I would have incurred that cost whether I win or lose a contract, either ways, because it's pre-bidding cost. Then that cost will be simply expensed off. After winning the bidding, okay, I have to obtain bank guarantee, I have to submit certain documents, certain certificates, certain legal contracts need to be signed. So all the costs which I incur after winning the contract are considered as incremental cost. Okay, those costs will be taken to contract cost in the assets. Okay, and then this contract cost will be taken to P&L as and when you recognize revenue in the same proportion you take it to P&L, or if it is expected to be reimbursed by the customer, then whenever the reimbursement happens, you take the reimbursement. Okay? So likewise, you account for contract cost. Okay, if the contract cost is already covered by inventory standard or fixed asset standard or any other standard, then you follow that standard. If it is not covered by any other standard, then only then you come to Ind AS 115. Okay. Some of the examples of direct cost eligible to be taken to contract cost: direct labor, direct material, allocation of cost which are incurred directly to the contract, cost explicitly recovered from customer, cost incurred only because the entity entered into a contract. Okay. Some examples of cost to be expensed is general admin cost, cost relating to satisfied performance obligations, which is already satisfied, so you need to expense of. Wasted material, abnormal wastage, and all those will be expense of, and those do not relate to unsatisfied performance obligation will also be expensed. So that is about contract cost. Some of the important disclosure, and this is the last slide after which I will take some questions, is you will have to give disaggregation of revenue. Means out of total revenue you will have to give product wise and services wise. So each performance obligation you can club it into nature of goods wise, and based on the nature of goods and services you disaggregate the revenue, and product wise, services wise you give disaggregation in the in your notes to accounts. Contract balances, whether it is contract asset or contract liability. Contract liability will be revenue received in advance kind of thing. Contract asset is unbilled revenue, or contract costs which we discussed. So those are contract balances. So you will have to give movement of contract asset, movement of contract liabilities. What are your performance obligations which are remaining performance obligations, so you'll have to give that. Any significant judgment, any if during transition, what are the practical expedients in transition and all that you have to give. I have not discussed transitional provisions because the standard is already implemented from 1st April 2018 onwards. So 18-19 already implemented, so we are in 19-20, so hence I have not discussed the transitional provisions. Any company implementing Ind AS now will have to do it as if there is no transitional, or transitional provisions will not be as much applicable to them. So hence I have not discussed much here. I'll take some of the questions. I'll go back and take some of the questions, or you can again repost if I have not covered your questions. Okay. So there is a question from Sumesh. Suppose if wholly owned subsidiary of the holding company is acting as an agent and also doing job work, then revenue is recognized in holding company or wholly owned subsidiary. See, if subsidiary is acting as an agent of the company, a holding company, then holding company will record all revenue and the cost which subsidiary company charges will be taken as cost. Okay. In consolidation anyways, everything internal gets eliminated and you will have to see as a group. But in standalone, subsidiary will be taken as agent, so subsidiary will only record its own charges as revenue, whereas entire revenue will be booked by holding company. But you'll have to clearly determine whether it is agent or principal. So that you will have to see within the context of the standard. Sanchita has a question. What if in case of principal sends goods to agent costing 100, agent is allowed to sell the goods at whatever price, even ownership is transferred to agent. Just one condition is preset that he cannot sell any goods below 110. So Sanjita, this is, so you know, the standards in IFRS distinguish two kinds of conditions. Okay, one which is kind of saving me, or it is only kind of precautionary, or it is only preventive kind of thing. You know, those are not substantive. In sense, in your example, the base price which has been kept as 110 is only to safeguard the seller. It is not to control the goods. Okay, so then it is not taken as substantive. That means the 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 distributor in this case will be acting as a principal and not agent. Okay, because this condition of 110 is only to safeguard and not to control. Essentially, the distributor has all the rights and all the control over the goods. So hence, you know, this distributor will be considered as principal. Thanks, Narendra, for reading my books. I'm really thankful to you. Jimit has a question. Suppose a telecom company selling a recharge voucher to its subsidiary and then subsidiary company selling it to distributor, then whether it's a principal agent relationship. So Jimit, you will have to evaluate, you know, you will need more facts. This is not a fact enough. You'll have to see whether subsidiary company can return the vouchers if it is not sold, whether it can sell at the price which it decides, or you know, those conditions you will have to evaluate. What happens if those vouchers get lapsed? Who will bear the loss? Those conditions you will have to evaluate and see whether it is acting as a principal or agent. If it is acting as a principal, then yes, principal. If not, agent. Gitika, can you give 5-6 practical example wherein as per AS we don't recognize, or we do recognize revenue, and in Ind AS 115 we don't? So Gitika, you know, more than AS and Ind AS, you'll have to see practice. AS was not clear in many things. It was based on risk and reward and not clear. For example, financing element. Financing element not mentioned by AS at all. Okay. In cash discount, AS used to say that cash discount is like an expense. So for example, if I have sold goods at 110 and then I give cash discount of 10, I recognize revenue of 110 and then I book expense of 10. 115 says that cash discount is like a amount paid by me to my customer, or customer not paying me that amount at all. So I have received only 100 from customer, hence my revenue is only 100. In fact, for goods it was always 100. The 10 rupees I charge only for time period. So ideally, even if I get 110, I should record 100 as for goods and 10 for time value of money, which is finance income. So way apart, you know, these two standards are very different from each other. Now risk and rewards control is also different. Many a times control may get transferred only later point in time from risk and rewards. For example, if I have taken insurance, as soon as goods cross my, or it is X works, I say that my revenue is fixed. Risks are transferred, significant risks are transferred, and insurance covers most of the risks. Pricing risk is not there. Credit risk I have covered. So most of the risk and rewards are transferred, or significant risk and rewards are transferred. Hence, I can recognize revenue. Whereas Ind AS 115 talks about control. Whether the customer can control the goods, can it redirect the goods, can it sell the goods in transit, who bears the loss if something happens in transit, those aspects it covers. So timing of recognition is different. Ind AS 115 never, AS 9 never spoke about bifurcating performance obligation or separating performance obligation in a single contract, and then recognizing revenue for machine separately, installation separately, maintenance separately. 115 breaks a contract into multiple aspects and then record revenue as and when each aspect is fulfilled. So, many things are different. Vishal, till this point, I understand that there is a lot of judgment and estimation involved at every stage. This will lead to varied presentation for different entities in the same industry. Further, if the management changes and new management has a different judgment estimation, it will impact the recognition. Vishal, see, though most of the standards in IFRS or Ind AS are based on management judgment and management estimates, but these are principle based standards. If you apply the principles correctly, I don't think there will be too varied answers. Answer may vary from transaction to transaction, event to event. Assessment can also vary. These are principle based standards, but I do not expect it to be way apart from each other. Okay, if the contracts are different, definitely accounting has to be different. But if contracts are similar, normally every person reading a contract should arrive at same conclusion. If they are not arriving at same conclusion, either their understanding is different or they are analyzing something else. So definitely management judgment is involved in accounting, but I don't think a same transaction or same contract will give different answers to different people. That may not be correct. Okay. What are the indicators of control, Vishal? Indicators of control is like risk and rewards, title. So there are multiple indicators given in the standard, but these are basically the control indicators. Three indicators of passing of control, transferring of control. Basically, like I said, risk and rewards, whether right to receive payment, and there is this customer accepting. So those are the indicators. Real estate accounting, Shubham, after implementation of 115, almost every real estate company, except for you can count on fingers, very few real estate companies, almost everyone has moved to completed contract. So whoever were on percentage completion method have moved to completed contract. Only one or two real estate companies have been able to successfully do it on percentage completion. That is because their stand is that they will not pay back the customer if the customer cancels the contract. Their contract is very well drafted, and even within RERA they are able to justify that they will not be returning the money to the customer. Even if they have to return, it will be management call, and they cannot be legally mandated to return the money, and hence they are justifying that they have right to receive consideration from the customer for the performance completed to date. So that second condition is fulfilled, and hence they are recognizing revenue. There is a staff paper of IASB. IASB who have drafted IFRS, they have a staff paper which says that this consideration, right to consideration, is not fulfilled in most of the real estate contracts, and hence it will be completed contract. Sankit has a question: leasing an asset along with manpower to operate it, whether 116. So if it is lease, it is 116, Sankit. So if it is lease, it is 116. But if it is if it is not specific asset, if it's a service which is given, a service may involve an asset. For example, car rental. Okay, if the customer decides where to take the car, how to drive, what speed to drive, where to use, how to use, all that stuff, then the customer controls the asset, then it's a lease. Okay, but if it's a taxi, for example, in Uber, I need to say point A, point B from to, okay, both things I have to say, then it's a service, then it's not lease, then it will fall in Ind AS 115. So you have to see whether it's a service. Service may involve an asset, or it's a leasing of an asset. So both are different things. Thank you, Sanchita. Venkat has a question. If I am operating a PMS service or an insurance product where a certain amount of return is guaranteed, can I record revenue during the period till I make the guaranteed return? So Venkat, you can recognize revenue, but you will have to estimate the returns, and you will have to adjust the revenue to the extent of those returns. So you can book revenue only to the extent you are almost probable or certain that this much revenue is assured. Okay, so there's a concept or a word called as constrained estimates. So estimates should be made in a manner that, you know, your expectation in future should be that these estimates will not change, or there will not be a reversal, significant reversal of revenue in future. So you be conservative. You may record revenue later on, but if revenue is reversed in future, then it is not correct. So standard says take constrained estimates, be conservative. Ravi Dutt, sir, how to align revenue recognition principle in this standard with GST? So see, taxes will always be different. It will be driven by GST. Income tax will have its own meaning or interpretation. GST law will have its own. So you cannot align revenue recognition with GST. It will be different. So you create a reconciliation between the GST and accounting. Darshan, I think I gave couple of examples for in transit. If any other question is there, you can be a little more specific. But I have given a lot of examples of in transit, how to book, when control will get transferred and all that. Khushbu, if you can go through scenario 2 of modification in revenue contract wherein transaction value does not change. She has already left, so I am assuming no, I don't have to answer that. Shubham, what are the major impact on real estate? Again, I have answered that. Suchitra, our company started recognizing professional services revenue on proportionate cost basis, whereas earlier it was milestone basis. Is it due to difference between risk and rewards and control? Suchitra, I cannot answer that unless I get more facts. Darshan, thank you. Tika, thank you. I think I have answered most of the questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bearing with me for the 2 hours. I hope I have answered almost all questions and I have covered almost all things in this 2-hour session, whatever I could. Thank you so much.
Yes, Anand sir.
This is now it's not you know, matlab abhi people can't hear na.
हाँ
बोलिए.
सर हो गया ना सेशन सर?
हाँ हो गया.
Anand bhai, very good evening.
Thank you.
Anand bhai, thank you so much. This is Vijayendra Jain.
Thank you Vijayendra, thank you so much. I hope
आज थोड़ा कुछ इश्यू हो गया कैमरा का, तो विजेंद्र भाई वो कैमरा पे नहीं आ पा रहे, तो आपको उनकी आवाज से धन्यवाद देना चाहते हैं.
Thank you.
आनंद भाई, थैंक यू सो मच. आपने हमारे लिए 2-3 बार टाइम चेंज किया, कभी सैटरडे, कभी संडे, कभी 2 से 6, कभी 3 से 6, कभी 6 से 8. तो थैंक यू सो मच.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much. Thank you.
थैंक यू सर. तो थैंक यू विजेंद्र भाई यार, ये फोन लॉन्च किया आपने.
हाँ, इसका रिकॉर्डिंग मुझे बाद में मिल सकता है क्या, अगर रिकॉर्डिंग हुआ है तो?
जी जरूर सर.
हाँ मिल जाएगा सर, रिकॉर्डिंग हुआ है आनंद भाई.
थैंक यू सो मच. थैंक यू.
जी
Thank you, Anand sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Anand sir, we got around 90% extremely satisfied and moderately satisfied rating from the participants.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you Anand.
Thank you Bhapna sir. Thank you Abhishek bhai. Thank you Virag bhai.
Thank you Vijendra bhai for coming.
Hello, Bafna ji.
Pleasure sir, pleasure. We are always with you.
हेलो बाफना जी, शायद म्यूट पे है क्या?
क्या विराट
ठीक है,
भाई ने बोला 8 बजे आना है तो आना है?
नहीं
क्या
अभी लाइव
विराट
चल रहा
भाई
है,
ने
ठीक है।
बोला अभिषेक भाई कि 8 बजे रहना है तो रहना है, फिर कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है हमारे पास।
ओके ओके विराट, आई एम क्लोजिंग.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you everyone. We'll meet tomorrow.